been going through SoundCloud into Audio Hijack.
Oh, okay. You're more of an IT guy. You're using software. I'm old
Yeah.
school. I got for about a $500, $600 investment, I got a Rodecaster, and it takes up to 4 mics and gives you sound effects, and you can control audio levels and do whether it's Bluetooth or direct to computer. It's if you guys, I mean, you've been doing this a while. You've got a lot of shows out. It might be worth the small investment to
Yeah.
put Jason in with upgrade Jason.
Well, I think what I actually need to do is there's some software that goes with my recording software called Loopback. And I think
Oh,
if I use that, then you will be able to hear it through Zoom or Discord or whatever. But the problem is I need to come up with $100 for it. So,
yeah, yeah. By the way, I love your Pac-Man art.
oh, thanks. Yeah.
That's my generation, not yours. That's
Oh, it's
cool.
mine. I was a little kid back then, but it was mine. I
Yeah,
was
I
Jason's
had
old
one
as
of the
shit.
first Pac-Man cocktail tables in my comedy club.
I want
When
one.
it, and before that, I had a Pong, if you remember that.
Oh yeah. You know,
And
I almost bought a Pong machine a few weeks ago at the flea market.
no way,
Yeah, it
that'd
was
be
like
cool.
$11. I was like, should I get this?
I'm still a gamer, so I love all that kind of stuff.
And you're speaking my language because that's like one of my one of the things I want from my house is I want a Miss Pac-Man cocktail machine. That's what I want.
Oh, they're out there. Jacob, what are you into?
Let's see. As far as nerdy stuff, I got a whole bunch of.
Yeah, I see all
Diabetes.
your little figures. You don't sleep with those at night, do you?
No, sadly, I sleep by myself at night.
Well, the figures might be the reason.
He's very into he's very into insulin and diabetes and
Oh, yeah,
just
I'm
being-
going through that with my father-in-law. Sorry about that. That's tough.
It's okay. I've had it for a decade.
Oh.
It's good material.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we're all on the same page. You kind of
yep.
know a little bit about me. I researched you guys a little bit. Congrats on your success so far.
Thank you.
And we'll try to make this an entertaining show.
So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna hit record, and Jacob's got a little bit of some Patreon shout outs. Then we're gonna play the music, which you won't hear, but then we'll come in and introduce you, and we'll get rolling.
Whenever you're ready, gentlemen.
All right, you ready, Jacob?
Yes, sir.
All right, 3, 2, 1.
It's another episode of the Open Micers podcast, which is brought to you by our lovely patrons over at www.openmicers.com, including Mr. Derek Diamond and Miss Kathy Gutierrez Figueroa. If you want to be as cool as them, go join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and let's start the episode.
And why is it not playing? There we go.
Your fault. I didn't mess up for once.
I got it. Ooh, and that sound, that music means it is Wednesday night, and it's time for the Open Micers podcast. My name is Jason Robbins.
I'm the good-looking co-host Jacob Craig, and our guest tonight I'm very excited for because he is an entrepreneur, podcast host of Your Host and MC. He is an author. He's done a little bit of everything. He is the illustrious Mr. R. Scott Edwards. How are you doing today, sir?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, so excited to be here with these young men. Hey, it's great. It's Scott Edwards live on stage. Yes, thank you. Don't be too excited. I love a good standing ovation. Of course, I'm not really on stage. It's just the famous podcast, the Open Micers podcast. Man, this is just so exciting. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for coming on. This is how you know that you made it in life, coming on Open Micers podcast.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I felt like such a loser until today.
But for our fans that don't know about you, why don't you give them a little bit of your background about the Laughs Unlimited comedy clubs, your work as a comedy producer and podcast host and whatnot? What should our fans know about you?
Well, I'll try to give you the quick elevator speech. First off, as a serial entrepreneur, I've had everything from a small construction company when I was 17 to a chain of comedy clubs. I even owned a submarine and a beach shack in the big island of Hawaii. So I've really had an opportunity to have a lot of different jobs, a lot of different companies. And the number one thing I learned, Jacob, is it's best when I work for myself because everybody else fires my ass.
I
When
have
it
a
comes to
question to
comedy,
start
oh
off.
yeah,
How
I'm
does
sorry, I
one
haven't
go
even gotten
about
to the comedy.
how does one go about procuring a submarine? Is
Oh,
what
well,
do you go through like a real estate agent or
no. I was a co-owner of a company called Snuba, which is a international underwater snorkeling company. It's very popular all around the world. I'm one of the owners, original stockholders, and the guys that developed Snuba uh, decided to build a semi-submersible tourist submarine, and I helped them launch it in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and it was very successful. And I said, you know what? I want one of those. So it was called the Nautilus. I ended up with the Nautilus 3. I put it in Monterey, California. And the bad news is that in Monterey, the water's very cold and there's a problem called algae bloom.
Mm.
So I had to actually pay a scuba diver to stay underwater with the sub on every tour, just keeping the windows clean so the people could see the sea lions and the sea otters and the kelp forest. So needless to say, Jason, it was a lot of fun to own a submarine, but it was one of my huge financial disasters. I lost my ass, and I ended up selling the submarine to the Wrigley Gum family, and it is now still operating out of Catalina Island.
What?
That is so cool. I need to get me a submarine guy. That's what
I
I'm
gotta tell
missing
you,
in life.
it's not quite like having a beach shack to pick up chicks, standing on the bow of the submarine. There was more a shock value. I did own a beach shack on the big island of Hawaii, and that, I gotta tell you, as a young single male, was amazing because all day long I had pretty girls in bikinis coming up to get sunscreen and rent towels and boogie boards, and I had to help them.
Well, that was what I was gonna say. Like, that's got to be the ultimate pickup line because it works on so many levels. Like, hey, baby, you want to come back and see my submarine? Like, it literally, like, you take her back because she thinks one thing, but you get there and it's an actual submarine.
Right. You want to go down with me? Hey, here we go.
Oh. But so before Jason so rudely interrupted you.
I'm sorry. You said submarine, and my brain went off.
So you give us a little bit of your comedy background as well.
So I'm an older gentleman, as I'm sure you can't tell, but I in August of 1980, I opened up the 12th full-time comedy club in the United States. My opening act, paying him $150 for the week, was a young man that came out from Phoenix, Arizona. You may have heard of him, Gary Shandling.
Mm-hmm.
And the headliner was George Wallace. But I really got a lot of help from people like Bob Saget, Dave Coulier, and went on, and started a comedy club that did very well. In fact, it paid for the submarine and the beach shack. And, the 80s were pretty cruising financially. I ended up growing it to 3 comedy clubs and had a chance to work with everybody from Arj Barker and Brian Posehn to Tommy Chong and Soupy Sales.
Wow. I mean, you've
Hell
just
yeah.
named off like 8 comedy legends just like right off the bat. I mean, you're going with George Wallace and like you've worked with all these people, and it's like I don't even know what to ask. I'm just tell me stuff.
Well, sadly, Jason, they all still owe me money. But anyway, no. I opened what's called an A room. So you had to have been in the business, had to have had some experience to even get on my stage. And a lot of the people that worked my stages went on, what I would say is got the golden ticket, went on to fame and fortune, but many others who were really, really funny. Steve Bruner, Tim Bedore, Jeff Jenna, Bobby Slayton, Tom McTeague, I can go on, went on and had great careers in stand-up comedy. But a few of them, like Ray Romano, Ellen DeGeneres, you may have heard of Robin Williams, all had a chance to work my stage and had a little bit of celebrity.
That's crazy.
It's amazing. So needless to say, you know a thing or 3 about some stand-up comedy. But I want to get into this before we get too far into the conversation, because This is the first podcast that at least me and Jason have had since the Oscars. We have to talk about the slap, right?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. I'm not an Oscar watcher anymore, and in fact, they were having the lowest ratings they'd had in history until the slap happened, and it made social media, and then everybody tuned in like he was going to slap him again. It was kind of weird, but and he may have deserved it. Who knows? But I think it was a mistake on both parties. I think Chris Rock was kind of pushing it with personal comedy, although there's video of Will Smith laughing at the joke initially. And then I think his wife said, hey, that was out of line. And then he was obligated, I think, to defend her. However, I think that if he wanted to make a statement, he should have just taken his wife and left the Oscars and then not been there when they announced him as a winner later on. That would have had a bigger, more positive impact. Yeah. Instead, you've got this woke Hollywood society saying, we don't believe in bullies and everybody has rights. And, we want to be careful of everybody's sentimentalities. Oh, unless Will Smith is going up and slapping the shit out of Chris Rock, because after he did that, which was totally shocking and unnecessary, Will Smith still got a standing ovation when he won his award. And that is so hypocritical of the Hollywood actors and everybody. I was very disappointed in the response of the people.
Yeah, I think you put that perfectly. I mean, Will Smith could have very easily, because he got on stage and Chris Rock led him on stage. He could have very easily. No clue.
He was like, what the hell's going on, Chris? And I got to give kudos to Chris Rock, because even though the joke was in bad taste and he took a pretty good slap for it, he, in show business, the show still goes on.
Right.
So he's able to compose himself and kind of try to laugh it off and keep moving forward, where, inside he had to be like freaking out. Like, what do I do? What do I say?
Right.
Because he could have easily just, hit Will Smith back. I mean, Chris has his own strengths, and it was just such a kind of, it was a Hollywood moment. You wouldn't expect to see that shit anywhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, my whole argument is if it would have been The Rock instead of Chris Rock, it wouldn't have happened, because he outweighs Chris Rock by like 50 pounds at least, and he's like a foot taller. So
yeah, no, it was uncalled for, and I just think everybody agrees that Will Smith could have managed that better. Even in defending his wife, there was other options. I mean, in this case, both Will Smith and Chris Rock could have turned the other cheek.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and my point has been, Will Smith got on stage, no one stopped him. First of all, he should have been stopped.
Yeah, where's security?
But since he did get on stage, he could have easily taken the microphone and said, Chris Rock, apologize to my wife right now.
Oh, yeah, that would have been a third option. There's lots of options before hitting somebody. I mean, in a day and age when we're trying to teach our children to be more benevolent and in understanding of others and not to use physical actions. Of course, Putin's a bad example of that. But for Will Smith to do that when there was so many other options. But I agree with you, Jacob. Where the hell was security? I mean, I know he's a big star, but if he's coming to the stage in that moment with that kind of angst on his, you could see it on his face. They should have made some effort to stop him, or kick his ass out of when it was done. Let's say after he slapped him, why didn't security take him out instead of letting him hang around to win his golden trophy? I mean, there was a lot of things managed incorrectly, and that's just my 2 cents. Don't send me cards and letters.
Well, I think the Academy should have some sort of backup plan in case something like that ever happens. So if something like that ever happens again, then immediately they get escorted out. And if they were going to win an award that night, then the next person gets that award automatically.
Yeah, no, definitely. And there is, you guys, I think, are in show business enough to know this. There is a 5-second delay on live stuff, but this took longer than that and was just so shockingly unexpected. In fact, to Jacob's note, when he was walking up, maybe one of the reasons security didn't come out is they thought he'd take the mic. They didn't know there was going to be a physical abuse
and he
situation.
is Will Smith of all people. I mean, he's like he's like America's older brother. You know, like he's like getting jiggy with it guy. I never in a million years thought that Will Smith would get on stage and hit somebody.
It's funny you mentioned that, Jason, because there's so many other actors that might act unruly like that. You didn't expect it out of Will Smith, who I think we all think is generally is a good guy and a good actor and done a fair amount of comedy, by the way.
Yeah,
right.
But he didn't have a sense of humor that night. But so Jacob, did we drill down a little bit? Do you feel better?
Yeah, I feel better. It's off my chest now. We had to get good slap content because everyone's getting content on the slap.
Yeah, and tell you what, just so that we have it officially out there, Will Smith.
Yeah, boo. Look, this just in. Will Smith, you're not invited to come on Open Micers podcast. Sorry, buddy. It's just.
I mean, he's not allowed to hit either one of us. I mean, I like my cheeks. They don't need any fresh prints on them.
Fresh Prince, I got it. Wait, I have it. Hold on, it's right here.
Yeah.
Well, I need a new co-host for next week.
Yeah.
But
so, you guys call it the Open Micers podcast. I've listened to a few of your shows, and you've interviewed a few comics, but you haven't discussed a lot about being an open micer. Are either one of you getting on stage and trying stand-up comedy?
Oh yeah, we've both been professional open micers for a few years now.
Good. No, it's important to do that. I recommend to everybody and anybody listening, you want to get on stage once or twice, whether you bomb or do well. The aspect of getting on stage is so cathartic and so healthy, and you learn something about yourself. It's a smart thing to do. So I'm happy to hear that you guys have done that. And let me throw this out for your listening audience, Jason, Jacob, if you don't mind. If you guys, anybody in your audience, if you email me at scottscomedystuff@gmail.com, I'd be happy to send you a free electronic copy of my book, 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic. Awesome. It has a chapter on stage fright. It tells you what you need to do to go from amateur to professional. And there's some great pictures of me with Yakov Smirnoff, Dana Carvey, Jay Leno, and more.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And that kind of leads us to the next question we were going to ask. You do have
there's more?
You do have an online course for up and coming comedians, and can you kind of go through, what the course entails?
Sure. Thanks for asking, Jason. So back in the 80s, when there was the big wave of stand-up comedy, I think a lot of people, if they thought about it, would realize, and you guys being in the business probably know this, but stand-up comedy has been around a long time. But in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, it was regulated to being the break between strippers or jazz bands, right?
Yeah.
Right. It wasn't an accepted art form, except maybe in the Catskills. It was very limited. In fact, when I opened my club, that's why there was only 12 full-time clubs in the whole country. It wasn't really an accepted art form. And of course, all that changed in the 80s. And by 1986, it was like Starbucks. There was a comedy club in every corner. It was on TV. And they kind of oversaturated it, which hurt us in the 90s. But the reason I bring that up is that there was a lot of people that thought, oh, if I get on stage and I'm funny for 5 minutes, I'm going to be the next Jay Leno, right? Or Craig Ferguson. And we knew as producers, and again, I'm not a comic, I'm a producer. I wrote a book called Be a Stand-Up Comic or Just Look Like One. And it's basically a guide to stand-up comedy from beginning to end. And I want to be honest with you and your audience. If you take the online course, it's based on that book. And the first half of the book talks about kind of the nightmares and the challenges that anybody would meet in trying to become a stand-up comic. Because there's not a lot of money. You're living in shitty places. You get good stages, bad stages, good crowds, bad crowds. And the book addresses all that. If you continue reading to the back half of the book, we as the authors assume that you're serious about this art form, and it starts to teach you what it takes to really go from amateur to professional. On the book I'm offering your audience, 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic, is more a direct, hey, if you're getting on stage, this is what you need to know. The online course is based on a book that's really wants to break down stand-up comedy to it's a much bigger book, much longer book, much more detailed. And professional comics make comments throughout the book. There's comments by professional comics on the online course. So the online course is a true tutorial from beginning to end.
So basically, it's kind of like a master class.
I don't, I don't want to say that, tout myself as being that good. I mean, there are some other, Steve Martin, I think, is doing an online course, and I'm having a brain fart, but there's Ross Bennett at the Comedy School of New York has a writing course and a stand-up course that you can do online. Ross Bennett used to work for me. Very, very funny guy. You can find that online. So there's a few books and there's a few websites that might help you be funny. And I want to make it clear to you guys and the audience that I'm not a comic. I'm not going to teach you how to be funny. But if you think you're funny or you want a career in stand-up comedy, I can teach you what it takes and where it will take you. And whether that's, being a perennial stand-up comic and making a living on stage, one of my regulars, Ed Solomon, was not a real good performer, but a terrific writer. Well, he wrote Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Oh, yeah.
He does all the Men in Black movies. Very successful script writer, and it all started with stand-up comedy. Any of you guys watch The Amazing Mrs. Maisel?
I haven't seen it yet, but
It's a great cable show about somebody wanting to get into stand-up comedy, but one of the actors in there started off on my club as an impressionist, Kevin Pollak. And he's got a ton of great movies. He's a great actor. So as I mentioned earlier, stand-up comedy is a great vehicle, but can lead to, writing, performing, acting, all kinds of different things. A lot of guys do warm up for sitcoms. That you might get a sitcom like Ray Romano, or you might get a talk show like Ellen.
Yeah.
In your opinion, what is the number one mistake that most young comics make?
They think it's easy. You really have to kind of work at it. When you think of something funny, record it, write it down wherever you are, whatever you're doing. If you do a set, make sure you record it and play it back and learn from each and every performance. It is, I think the biggest mistake is people think, oh, I just have to go on stage and make my friends laugh.
Yeah.
Well, when you got a room full of strangers that paid hard money, they have a higher expectation, right? And the biggest challenge, if you guys have been getting on stage, you know what I'm talking about. Friday night late show, right? That's when the drunk people are out and you're trying to do jokes and you got the screaming drunk bachelorettes, yelling, "Take it off!"
Right. So that's best case scenario for me.
Yeah.
But
looking at you, Jacob, I'm sure they're all thinking, "Take it off."
But no, around here where we're from South Mississippi.
I didn't know that. I'll talk slower.
Thank you. That really helped. No, my hearing's good. It's the reading that's the problem. But around here
there's clubs everywhere, right?
Well, there's actually the nearest club to us is about 2 hours away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I know that COVID really hurt our industry.
Right.
It not only hurt Hollywood in a whole, but stand-up comedy specifically took a big hit during COVID. A lot of the clubs didn't make it. The ones that did had to do a lot of limited shows. I know a lot of professional comics that were trying to do their perform online, and it just didn't, really work that well because you can't hear the audience. How do you develop timing and engage with an audience and build a personal relationship if you're, across a video screen from them? It's very difficult.
Well, we do have a lot of bars around here that do open mic that are designated comedy open mic nights.
And what I will say about our area is that the rooms around here, they're all bar shows and they're all so rough that if you hone your craft and you can make the people in these rooms laugh, I wholeheartedly believe that you can make anyone else anywhere laugh, because these rooms are so stacked against you with drunk people, like people who are not here for the show, people who want to heckle you, that if you can do well at a rough South Mississippi bar, I think you can do well pretty much anywhere else.
You know, that's a truism, Jacob. And it has been said many times that those kind of audiences are the hardest, but just like the best things come from a crucible where things are forced. And when you can perform, get the attention of the audience, be able to engage with them and get them to laugh in that kind of scenario, and you could do it time after time, you're learning basically the hard way. But what happens is when you get into a real comedy club, it's going to be so easy and you're going to have so much fun.
Right.
You're going to love it. But so congratulations for banging out those gigs, and don't stop, because it will help you develop down the road.
Absolutely. Yeah, the comedy clubs that I have done have been so much easier than just the average Mississippi open mic. But what I did want to talk to you about a little bit, because a struggle that I personally have been having in my comedy career, which is why I definitely want to get a free copy of your book, is I have been getting screwed over on the business portion of stand-up comedy.
Well,
where
oh, I think it's great you bring that up. In fact, Jason asked, what is the number one thing that people getting into comedy don't realize? And I still think that it's hard work. But I would have to say a strong number two is that you have to have some business acumen, right? You have to be able to negotiate a deal, make sure you get paid. And, you know, a lot of them are verbal contracts, to be honest, but you have to be strong enough and aware enough business wise to treat stand-up comedy is what it is, which is a business. And guess what? You're the product. So when you're selling your product to that club owner or that nightclub owner or that producer, you're going to sell yourself, negotiate, and then make sure that they follow through. And if you leave any vagueness, they'll screw you every time. I hate to say that, but that's what happens.
Right. Yeah, a situation that I had a while back, I actually opened for a nationally touring headliner. He sold out the room. I was tacked on as his opener. I did a good 10 minutes. I absolutely murdered the room to the point where the headliner was like, "Hey, that was some good comedy." And then I only got paid, you know, not even as much as I put in gas to get to the venue. So I'm like,
so
well,
let me interrupt. Did you negotiate a set price before you hit the stage?
I did not. And I tried to, but of course, what all the producers hit you with is, "Oh, well, I'm going to pay you out of the bar tab. We have to see how many drinks are going to be sold. We have to see how many tickets are going to be sold."
So I mean, by the way, congratulations on having a great set, and having a headliner compliment you that way means he may bring you along to some other gigs, because
I hope so. Probably
headliners are always looking for good people to open up for them. But you learned a difficult and an expensive lesson, but you learned the lesson. So next time you go into that club or bar and they try to do a door deal or a bar deal, say, "Well, I'll agree to that, but I want a guaranteed $100 because I had expenses getting here, or a guaranteed $50 because I had expenses getting here," whatever you negotiate. And then if it's above that, great. And if him and Ha say, "Well, you know what? I'm a professional. And if you can't agree to my terms, you know, thanks, maybe next time," and have the balls to walk out. You know, too many comics, especially open micers, are kind of the, how do I put it politely, sluts of the industry. In other words, it is important to get on stage, and a lot of times you won't get paid, but still value yourself and have some business talents, and make sure that the situation is going to work to your benefit, because you're also hurting the club owner, the producer, because if he gets away with it with you, guess what? He's going to pull that shit on everybody behind you.
Well, one thing I really wanted to ask you is, as far as a club owner, promoter, say take comedians at the level of me and Jacob here, where we're ready to take that next step, where we're wanting to travel out, open for bigger names, things like that. We have a good 5 minute reel or whatever, a 5 minute set that's a really good tape. What's the best way? Like, what do you want to hear as a promoter? Like, if I'm going to cold email somebody, like a promoter, what's the best way to sell myself as far as, hey, let me come open for a national, a headliner, or can I come over and headline like a smaller night or something like that?
So, great question, Jason. You just have to remember what I said earlier, and it's hard for a lot of people to think this way, but it's a business and you're the product.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what you're talking about is the marketing of that product. And so, what you want to do is have a professional headshot. Everybody should have a business card. And when you approach that person, whether it's an email, snail mail, or you go and see him personally, you act as a pro and you say, hey, I've got, I can do 10 or 15 minutes, but I have a solid 5 minutes I'd like you to see because I think I'd be of value to your venue. And you may have to work for free for the first time as a showcase, or as you said, present it virtually through a YouTube video or mail him an MP4 video of yourself or an audio of you doing 5 minutes so that they can see that. And if you're consistent and persistent, in other words, don't just ask once, keep going at it. If there's a big club 2 hours away, Jacob, you should be contacting them every month so that they're so annoyed they book you just to get rid of you.
I'm going to write that down. I'm writing a lot of things down. I wrote down get more balls, and I'm writing down get more balls and annoy people. That's what I've got so far. I think I'm going to make it in the business.
So I'm going to give you a quick analogy. I've been a lifelong salesman. So whether it was my construction company when I was 17 or the insurance agency I just sold and retired from, there was always a sense of salesmanship. Even in the comedy club business, you have a product, you have to sell that product to somebody else. And you don't have a half hour to do it. You have to do what I call an elevator speech. Everybody in sales knows that term, where you, in just a few minutes, and what Jason was alluding to, you might do this in an email, but you want to present yourself. Hey, I've worked with so-and-so. I've had this experience. Here's a short copy of my set, and I think I'd be an asset to your facility. And I only need, $5,000 to appear in your club. So, I'm kidding. Of course, you want to be reasonable in what your expectations. And by the way, let's speak to that. It is a money game. If you're doing open mics and bars, you should just at least get gas money, 25, 50 bucks, 100 bucks, whatever, depending on what you think the crowd and the club will handle. But you start getting to real comedy clubs, there should be real money. It should be a few $100s for that opening set. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say that if you're still only doing 5 or 10 minutes, you need to push yourself because you're not considered a professional unless you have a half-hour material and 20 minutes of it is rock solid. Does that make sense, Jason?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, Jason, he's talking to you.
Well, I saw him snoring off because I'm talking too much.
I'm good. But I was actually thinking a lot about, because I'm also a drummer, a lifelong drummer, and it's easy for me to sell myself as a drummer because I'm very confident in my abilities. But when it comes to something like comedy, like I still have that thought in my head of like, am I ready to make that next step? Am I funny enough? Do I have enough material? Do I, is all my material good enough? It's kind of like that. I have to take that first huge step, and it's hard.
We're all our own worst enemy. And if there was a third thing that open micers are missing, it's confidence. And you get confidence by performing regularly and getting down your timing, getting down material that people can relate to. And I haven't seen you guys perform, and I don't want to step on any toes, but I'm not talking about getting up on stage and going, my freaking wife wanted some freaking bed, so I went to the freaking store and, that freaking bitch. That's not comedy. I mean, it may get some shock laughs. It may get some shock humor. But if you really want to go somewhere in the business, write about your own life in your own way, because everybody in the audience can relate to it.
Mhm.
And that's why you hear so much material about driving or going on an airplane or dealing with the IRS or being a homeowner or being a parent or being in a relationship. Why? Because everybody's done that. And what makes it special and what makes it funny is you're putting your twist on it, right? So there's 100 jokes about going shopping at the store. You know, women shop, men buy beer and toilet paper, right? So you just have to find your humor. What makes it unique is you. You know, Jason and Jacob are both open micers, but you see things a little bit differently. So if Jason told a joke about driving to Memphis or something, and then Jacob did a story about driving to Memphis, they're going to be different, right? It's the same trip. Everybody in the audience will be able to relate to it, but you're going to come at it from a different approach. And that's kind of the secret to all stand-up comedy writing, is making it so that everybody can relate to it, and then putting your humorous uh, twist on it. That's really, and again, I'm lecturing a little bit, but that's because I think your audience is interested in the industry, and I want them to do it right. And you'll hear the same thing or, you know, on my online comedy course, and you'll see the same thing in both of my books. I'm consistent and I'm persistent because what I'm talking about works. And how do I know it works? Well, somebody like Brian Posehn, who started off as an opening act at my club and is now a known actor on The Big Bang Theory, or you have Carlos Alazraqui, who started off as an opening act MC at my club and is now a voice character on Ren and Stimpy and Casa Grande and a lot of animated shows, and he's one of the stars of Reno 911. You also have people like I mentioned, Gary Shandling, that start off as an opening act. We all know Gary Shandling had the Gary Shandling show, and also the Larry Sanders show was a huge success. But Jay Leno, Jerry Seinfeld, these guys worked for me. They weren't opening acts, open micers, but they were still learning their craft on my stage, and then were able to take what they learned and take it on TV and be huge successes. All right, I'm sorry. I'll quit talking.
No, you're. This is exactly what our audience does want to hear is you to talk, because they're so tired of us talking. They don't want to.
Well, I was going to say something, Jacob, but I was trying to be polite.
But no, just so to let you know kind of where me and Jason are as comedians. First of all, I'm better, but we actually both have headlining sets coming up. I'm doing 30. I don't know if you're doing 20 or 30, Jason.
I'm doing 20.
Okay, yeah. So Jason's doing 20 and I'm doing 30 at the same venue. We're both gonna be
headlining. That's awesome. So, have fun.
Yeah, we're not exactly amateur open micers, but we're not exactly, well, we don't have heavy credits.
Yeah,
right. So what you want to do, and sounds like you're more like feature acts. In my club, you'd be a feature act, and to be a headliner, you want about 90 minutes of material that is going to be an hour of really strong material. So a feature act is going to have 45 minutes to an hour of material, but he really can rock it for 30 minutes, right? An opening act should have 30 minutes of material, but can really rock it for 10, 15, or 20 minutes. Everybody thinks they have more material than they have. And here's a little tip that you guys already know, I'm sure. You want to close with your funniest bit and open with your second funniest bit. And then if you're trying new shit, put it right in the middle, like a donut hole, right?
Yes.
Because in the beginning, it's so important to earn the trust of the audience and prove that you're funny. And then later in the show, you want to bring them to a crescendo so that when you're done, they're like, yeah, and they want more. You always want to leave them more. I'll give you a great story. So Gary Shandling was now a regular headliner at my club. And he was, he wasn't doing talk shows and stuff yet, but he was a really good headliner and actor. And he did about a 20-minute, 30-minute warm up, kind of proved who he was to the audience. And then he stopped and he goes, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be on the Tonight Show next week. And it was going to be his first Tonight Show appearance, which made him a superstar. And he goes, I need to try out some new material. Do you guys mind? Well, the audience loved that because it felt like they were getting a peek behind the curtain. And I'm not kidding. Gary Shandling pulled out 3x5 cards that he had some ideas on, and he stood there and read off the ideas. And if it got a laugh, he'd keep it or make a note. And if it didn't, he'd kind of throw it away. And the audience loved being a part of that. But I tell the story to prove a point that if you've gained the approval and the connection with the audience, they'll let you get away with anything in the middle, as long as you as a professional can bring it back and really kill them at the end with your material. Is that kind of make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Yeah.
You know, try different things. You know, a lot of people boohoo prop comics, you know, magicians, jugglers, prop comics per se, Carrot Top like people, Gallagher type people. But it's an easy way to add 30 seconds or a minute of material to your set. So if you're already got 30 minutes of stand up and you want to add 5-10 minutes, how easy is it to grab a couple props from home or on stage, think of something funny about it as a throwaway? They're throwaway jokes, but you're adding material to your set without having to really sit and write and hone something. Does that make sense?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to cheapen it. I'm just saying that there are ways that a producer approves of. I'm a producer, that you can build upon your time. And we all know that in comedy, it's all about stage time.
Yeah. What do you think about like a headlining touring comic coming to, let's say, Nashville and doing like 5 minutes of local jokes up front that are like throwaways?
Well, they're doing that on purpose to get the audience on their side. So let's say you've got Dana Carvey flying in from LA to perform in Memphis. While he's flying, he's thinking of jokes about the South, about Memphis, about Tennessee, and not per se to pick on the people, but he wants to be able to relate to them. Stand-up comedy is all about relating to the audience, and that's why I talked about how important the material is relatable. You know, if you're writing jokes about I don't know what I could think of, but you know, doing some strange job that no one's ever heard of and stuff, it's going to be difficult for the audience to relate to. But Dana Carvey, while he's on the way to the gig, writes purposefully a few little throwaway jokes, and they're not genius gems, they're literally throwaways, just so that when he's getting started, he gets the audience attention, he pulls them into the conversation, and he engages with them. And those are such important things in order to have a successful show.
There's a lot of comics I listen to and watch that do that, you know, even on their specials or their albums or whatever. Those first few jokes are always about whatever city they're in. And, you know, I've never really thought about that till just now. And I just now thinking about it.
It's the same when you, a lot of the guys I know made a great living doing corporate humor. They got off the clubs because they got tired of, you know, fighting the drunks and the people playing pool while you're trying to do comedy. So they went into corporate comedy where you have to be clean and you have to have good solid material, but they always research the company and they'll ask questions of the people booking them. And, you know, who's the boss? What's he like? Is there anybody in the office that's kind of the class clown, right? What do you do with this company? Explain it to me, so that when they're on the way to that gig, they're writing material about that company and the people that work at the company. So as soon as he goes out, he says something like, you know, I hear Bob's the class clown. You know, if he could only get his hair done right, you know, and boom, the whole audience knows who that Bob guy is, and they're immediately engaged with the headliner.
Yeah. I hate to go on a whole tangent about this, but what do you think about I'm gonna do it anyways. What do you think about comics who kind of, well, and this kind of goes back to the Chris Rock thing a little bit too, is roasting audience members a little bit, because I think when it comes to roasting, there's a level of consent that needs to be, you know, that needs to happen. So
it has to be agreed on ahead of time. Well, and I would have asked you guys as new comics, because I'm old school, is I feel it's extra hard for people like you in today's society, because I don't think comedy's changed all that much. The comedy I share on my podcast, stand-up comedy or host and MC, plug, is from the 80s and 90s. And I think it still works. It's still funny because funny is funny. However, in this day and age, today, the audiences have changed. And you've got a certain people that are woke or afraid that somebody in the audience might be offended. And so you bring up a good point that in a roast, the reason the roast work is that the roastee knows what's coming.
Right.
Whereas if you get on stage and you're an insult comic like Don Rickles or Bobby Slayton, back in the day, you could get away with it because people knew it was harmless comedy. But in today's society, people are so easily offended. They have such a thin skin that even if they're in a comedy club, they are sometimes overreacting to what, comedy is meant to be comedy. And that means picking on sometimes jobs or situations or people or ourselves. So I tell comics, young comics like you, that if you want to play around with insult comedy, make it self-deprecating, because then there's the automatic approval because you allowing yourself to pick on yourself. I have a little bit of weight, a little bit of a belly, and I would go on stage and I always wore a Hawaiian shirt. And sometimes somebody would say, "Hey, you're fat," or da 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 da. And I just rub my belly and I go, "Well, first off, this is success. And second off, I don't hide it. I decorate it." So I'm taking something that's a heckle or something that's obvious, but it's about myself and turning it into a joke. And then people relax a little bit because they realize if you're willing to make fun of yourself, you're harmless. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
You're not just attacking the audience.
Yeah, and I asked that because some of the best sets that I've had on the road have been from, roasting an audience member who luckily was very into it. But that's a very, risky scenario nowadays, is if you pick the wrong audience member to mess with, then, you could get the shit slapped out of you on live television.
Well, I was an MC. So as a producer of my shows, I emceed my shows. So I ended up basically getting more stage time than anybody because I was on stage 6 nights a week, 8 shows a week for 21 years. So I did a lot of audience participation. And what you learn is that by talking to somebody in the audience, you can usually pick up, especially the more you do it, who's going along, who's there to have a good time, and who might be a little uptight. If you pick out some girl and you go, hey, welcome to the show. Hope you're to have a good time. Are the 10 cats you left at home doing okay? Somebody watching them, right? You're presuming she's a cat girl. And if she's, easily offended, you just move on to the next person. If she laughs and says, "I don't have 10 cats," and I go, "Oh, yeah, that's right. It's a frog and a goat." It's something. I mean, you can go on with it. One of my old bits that I used to do all the time is there'd be some guy with a goofy sweater, and I'd end up calling him Sweater Boy all through the show. And 9 times, well, actually, really 10 times out of 10, the person kind of liked the attention. Everybody knew it was kind of an ugly sweater, even him. And you could get away with it. It's a good callback, right? You could do it every time I went on stage as the MC. "Hey, Sweater Boy, how's that third drink doing? You doing all right? All right, good. Keep drinking. The more you drink, the better the show," right? So those kind of things work for you. However, my fear in this day of woke society is if I pick on Sweater Boy, there might be somebody on the other side of the room going, "Oh, well, that sweater was a gift." And somebody else goes, "Some sheep gave their all for that sweater, the wool." And somebody else goes, "Oh, but what would his mother say?" People are putting their personal limits onto somebody else. And that concerns me.
Yeah. That's honestly, I personally don't like doing crowd work. I mean, number one, I'm hearing impaired. I can only hear out of one ear, so I can't hear what anybody's saying anyway in a crowd. So, you think that's going to hurt me at some point? Because I do know there's a lot of promoters out there that like when comics to do crowd work.
Well, I think it depends on the comic. I mean, I've worked with literally thousands of comics, and there's some people that are really gifted and working with an audience. Robin Williams is probably the most famous, but there's been many, many others. And there's people that just went up and wanted to do their set, do what they thought was funny and get off stage. And if there was any engagement with the audience or heckling, they just ignored it or freaked out a little bit. You know, you just have to find your voice on stage, right? You want to be you. And if for Jacob, it means interacting with the audience, and for Jason, it means not interacting with the audience that much, that's perfectly okay. You just finding your way to present what you think is funny. What's great about stand-up comedy, and again, this will sound a little like a soapbox, but it really is the last bastion of free speech.
Oh yeah.
Now, I was making fun of people that swear and do a bunch of silly dick jokes on stage. You know what? That's their right. It's freedom of speech. Me as a producer who was trying to develop comics to go on to sitcoms and fame and fortune, my job was to try to keep people clean and keep humor clean, and because I think it takes you farther. However, as a point of freedom of speech, anything and everything is all right. A great analogy of that, you guys know Bob Saget from Full House and Fuller House.
Mm-hmm.
He's like America's dad back in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on stage, he was the dirtiest comic ever. He played guitar, did funny, dirty limericks, loved a good poop and fart joke, but he wasn't just swearing. He was just doing material that was a little off color. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
So it was adult material talking about sex or poop jokes or whatever, but he did it in an adult, funny way. He wasn't just dropping F-bombs. In fact, he rarely swore on stage, but he was filthy. And then he gets on. It was so funny because he did Full House. And for my club's 10th anniversary, I had Dave Coulier and Bob Saget at my club, and Full House was already been out for a couple of years. And I can't tell you how many moms called up and said, I want to get tickets for my children to see the show. We're like, no, this is an adult club. You got to be 21, and there's a reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved Bob Saget's comedy. Rest in peace to him for sure.
Yeah, that was
and Gary Shandling. It was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
he was supposed to do your podcast.
Yeah, we had talked about him going on my podcast, but he was very busy with his own podcast, and he was on tour when he passed away. So it was quite a shock when that happened, because a great talent, a great guy, always. He was instrumental in helping me start my club and taught me how to treat comics, what to pay comics, and what was expected of an audience. In fact, a quick side story, in 1982, I shot my first TV commercials, and Bob Saget acted in them and helped write and direct them. And he just did it for fun. He didn't charge me any money. In one of them, he throws me off a building, and in the other one, he hit me with a car. And they came out great. You can see both those commercials on my website and on my video membership site, or I can send you copies, guys. But the point is that he was a real giving guy, big-hearted guy, that whether he was dirty doing stand-up comedy or Mr. Clean is the dad on Full House, he always was thoughtful of the audience and would get a laugh no matter what. Oh, another quick side story, if you don't mind. It's early now. It's late 1980. Bob Saget, Dave Coulier again, but this is not 10-year anniversary. This is like the first year, and I'm sitting with them after a show, and they're laughing. And we're having drinks, and I'm like, obviously I'm the third wheel because they're making each other laugh. And I'm the boss. I go, hey, what the frick? What's so funny? And Bob pulls up this piece of paper, and wrapped inside was some table lint and a little note saying, Bob, this is some of my pubic hair just for you. And it was just Dave and Bob making each other laugh, right? When you're in comedy, it's kind of the stuff that's over the top that makes you really laugh, right? So these guys were sharing pubic hair in private notes and cracking themselves up. It was a fun moment.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful.
I do want to say Gary Shandling is definitely one of my all-time favorite too. And if you've never heard it, go back and listen. He had one of the greatest theme songs of any of the comedians that got TV shows, the Gary Shandling show. Go back on YouTube and listen to that theme song if you've never heard it, because it's literally
Gary Shandling show.
Yeah.
It's you're gonna see Gary.
Gary called me up and asked me to write a theme song. That's all it is. Like it's so stupid and awesome at the same time.
Yeah, maybe we should consider it early rap.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
I don't want to make you guys jealous, but I actually have a picture of Gary Shandling in a dress.
I was going to ask you about that. So
why perchance does that exist?
So my club, Laughs Unlimited, was in a tourist area of Sacramento called Old Sac, and it's based on all the buildings are from the 1800s. There's cobblestone streets and wooden sidewalks, and about 2 blocks away from my club was one of those old picture places where families could go in and dress up in 1800s garb. Well, unbeknownst to me, Gary went in, got decked out in a big hoop dress and a nice Sunday hat, and had a picture taken, had it and autographed it to me and gave it to me as a gift. And I was just, he wasn't, Gary Shandling at the time. He was just a friend. But he wasn't famous is my point. And I just thought this was such a terrific gift. I put it up on the wall with all the 8x10s of everybody that worked the club. Well, not 2 weeks later, Bob Saget came through as a headliner, and Bob did not want to be outdone. So he went over to this photo place and he did a full-on 1800 school marm look with the little white gloves, little fan, and had it autographed to me as well. And I had those 2 pictures side by side up on my wall for over 10 years. It
That's
was
awesome.
So cool that they thought so much. I mean, I think they did it, Gary just did it as a gag and Bob did it to kind of try to outdo or match Gary. But for me to get those as a gift was a real honor and really fun to share.
2 things about that. Old Sac is actually what we call Jason. And
well, I didn't want to judge.
And if you want a signed picture of me in a dress, all you have to do is ask, because they exist.
Well, I think that's great, and I will keep that in mind. And next time I'm looking for that perfect gift, Jacob, I'm going to reach out to you.
It's a good stocking stuffer. It really is.
Well, Mr. Edwards, thank you so very much. I know we're getting to the end of our time here, and we've learned so much with you being here. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and tell everybody where they can find your stuff at.
Well, I want to say thanks to you guys. It's great to be on with 2 stand-up comics that are doing something and getting their voice out there with a podcast. So for you and your audience, my podcast is called Stand Up Comedy. Your host and MC. It's available on all directories, and it's all about either live performance from my TV series or my concerts or my stage shows. Also interviews with a lot of comics, famous and not so famous. And then my website, Scott's Comedy, Stand Up Comedy Host and MC.com has a lot of information and pictures and links to the podcast. But I have a second website, scottscomedystuff.com, and that will find you the online comedy course and the membership site that Jason was talking about. Be sure to check it all out. But don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, and listeners to this podcast, shoot me an email at scottscomedystuff@gmail.com if you're interested in a free electronic copy of my latest book, 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic, or go to Amazon and buy it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I will definitely email you to get that book, and I suggest that all of our listeners do as well. We'll go ahead and put that email in the bio as well, Jason, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we'll do that. So, Jacob, you got anything you want to throw out there before we leave this evening?
I do. I want to go ahead and start promoting for my headlining set, April 16th. Yes! April 16th at Jack's by the Tracks in Pascagoula, Mississippi. I'm going to be doing a hot 30 minutes, and some of it will be good.
Wait a minute. We just talked about confidence, Jacob. Confidence.
You got to leave them wanting more, though.
Yeah. And I will be at the same spot, Jack's by the Tracks, on the 23rd. So come out and check us both out. And so that's what we got coming up this next month. And thank you again for coming on the show, Mr. Edwards. And if you would like to follow us, we are at Open Micers on Twitter and Instagram. OpenMicers.com takes you straight to our Patreon, where as little as $1 a month gets you all the extra episodes and everything before everybody else. And send us an email, openmicerspodcast@gmail.com. And we love you guys, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Yo, my friends.
That was an epic episode.
Yes, it was. We even forgot to promote our new T-shirts.
Oh
Shoot,
my
I forgot.
gosh. Well, let's just do another hour.
Well,
Yeah, we have T-shirts to sell, Jason.
We're still on Twitch, and this will go to YouTube. So go to tpublic.com/openmicerspodcast and go get you a new yoked T-shirt.
Be yoked like me, ladies. Be yoked like me.
Oh, I like that. Good job. I think that's great. And thanks for doing that. That was a great show. Hopefully your audience had some entertainment and information out of that. Thank you so much for having me on. Be sure to send me a link when it actually releases so I can share it to my social media and get you guys some more listeners.
Absolutely. It'll be out on the Patreon tonight, and then it will be released to the public Friday morning, and we will let you know.
That would be awesome, Jason. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody on Twitch, and we will see you guys next week.